All right, so welcome everyone. So wonderful to see all of these people here, all of you here for this important housing justice forum hosted by MHCH, Making Housing and Community Happen. And as has already been said, before we start tonight's Zoom meeting, please mute yourself and pause your video if you're stepping away so it is not, distracting. My name is Bert Newton. I am the Outreach and Liaison Coordinator for Making Housing and Community Happen. We are honored to have Sarah Walker of National Community Renaissance, also known as National Core, and Phil Burns, the chair of our Congregational Land Committee, here with us tonight. They will be our featured presenters this evening. I also want to recognize Pastor Jean Birch of Community Bible Church, who is also with us this evening. Her church is the largest provider of affordable housing in Pasadena. Through King's Villages and Community Arms, they provide 466 units of affordable housing to over 1,500 residents. So what we're talking about tonight, affordable housing on church land, is in one sense expanding on that amazing work. So Pastor Jean, we are honored to have you with us tonight. And Anthony, at this moment, is holding up an award certificate that we want to give to you. And we will get that to you. Thank you for all your amazing work. You are a forerunner and an inspiration for the rest of us. So for our first segment of tonight's program, Dr. Anthony Manousis, we just held up the award. He is the chair of our ASHA committee, and he will bring us a spiritual reflection.
Yes, well, this is the second to last week of Lent, traditionally a time of fasting and repentance. So I'd like to share with you a passage from the prophet Isaiah that describes the kind of fasting and repentance that God prefers. This passage seems especially relevant in light of the fact that the Pasadena City Council did not approve hero pay for workers who risked their lives so that we could have groceries on the table and other necessities. This passage also ends with a vision of God's intention for under-resourced areas of our city. And for those who are homeless and hungry, food and housing for everyone in need will be like the dawning of a new day. So here are the words of the prophet Isaiah. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. On the day of your fasting, you do as you please, and you exploit all your workers. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is not this the kind of fasting that I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called the repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. This is our goal at MHCH, to create a community that takes care of the most vulnerable, to be a place where broken places are rebuilt and restored. Thank you very much.
Let's have a moment of silence. Okay, this next part of our program, I need to share my screen. Second here. And slideshow in the beginning. So I've entitled this, What's Happening at MHCH, otherwise known as Committee Reports. So first of all, safe parking. About 1/4 of people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County are living in their cars. In the San Gabriel Valley, it's 1,241 people that are living in 675 cars. Despite the urgent need, there are presently no safe parking programs in the San Gabriel Valley. But on April 1st, our Safe Parking Committee is launching the first safe parking program in the San Gabriel Valley. MHCH has partnered with Foothill Unity Center and a church that we can't name in the San Gabriel Valley to run this pilot program. The church will host the program in their parking lot and provide breakfast, light breakfast, and volunteers. Foothill Unity will provide case management, referrals, security, and a porta potty. We are committed to a well-run, high-quality program. From this pilot, we plan to expand to more church sites throughout the San Gabriel Valley. Congregational Land Committee. Congregations across the nation are partnering with affordable housing developers to build affordable housing. Our Congregational Land Committee consults with churches to do that. They walk churches through various options available to them, conduct feasibility studies, and assist them in choosing an affordable housing developer that is right for them. Our committee is currently consulting with 12 churches in Southern California. There are upwards of 40 that are interested, but we're consulting actively with 12. One of those churches, pictured here, New Life Holiness Church in Pasadena, has chosen a developer and is planning to build 52 units of affordable housing. And the church plans to use the income from the ground lease to help others at risk of losing their homes pay their rent or mortgage. This is an African-American church in a historically African-American neighborhood that has been suffering displacement through gentrification. They will build 52 units and also prevent others from being displaced. But they need the zoning changed. We believe this is a matter of racial justice. So this committee is working to rezone churches for affordable housing in Pasadena, in Sierra Madre, in Fullerton, in Yorba Linda, in Gardena, and some other communities. And that brings us to the statewide rezoning of churches for affordable housing. In addition to working with local cities to rezone churches for affordable housing, we are also working with a statewide coalition to do something very, very similar. Currently, we and our coalition partners are meeting with legislators to promote the bill or to promote this plan. We recently had a wonderful meeting with Senator Anthony Portantino. We had many constituents and several pastors on the call. We opened and closed the meeting with prayer. Portantino enthusiastically supported it, and he donated $5,000 to us. So it was a great meeting. That brings us to Affordable and Supportive Housing Advocates, or ASHA. ASHA's current initiatives are, first, supporting the Congregational Land Committee's campaign to rezone religious land for affordable housing. ASHA got the City Council to direct the Planning Commission to look at the policy with a sense of urgency. Now, the Planning Commission ended up taking it off the agenda, and ASHA is planning meetings with officials as well as prayer vigils and other actions to gain public support and re-agendize and approve this important policy. Second, ASHA supports efforts to ensure that the concerns of mostly low-income Latinx neighbors around the proposed Summer Hill development on the 99-cent store lot on Villa and Los Robles are heard, and that the developer provides on-site affordable housing and other benefits. Third, ASHA is also working with the newly formed Pasadena Housing Justice Coalition to make sure that Pasadena's revised housing element realistically plans for 6,000 units of affordable housing in the next 8 years, as needed by local residents and as required by the state. Finally, ASHA is working with Pasadena for All and Union Station to see how tiny homes can be built as a bridge for housing Pasadena's unhoused residents during and after the pandemic, when the need for housing is growing exponentially. This committee is looking for new members. Next, we have the Community Land Trust Committee. Community land trusts are popping up across the nation and around the world. Community land trusts, or CLTs, are nonprofit organizations that treat land as a public good. Community land trusts help people get into home ownership by greatly reducing the cost of home ownership and keeping those homes affordable in perpetuity. The CLT owns the land and works to ensure that it is used in ways that benefit the community. The largest part of the price of a home tends to be the land that it sits on. Community land trusts put the land into a nonprofit trust so that the people only have to buy the actual house and not the land. In a place like Southern California, this model helps make homes affordable and helps get people into home ownership who might never be able to otherwise. These homes remain affordable to the next home buyer through a shared equity formula in which the homeowner earns equity and the trust retains the subsidy, which keeps the homes affordable. Our Community Land Trust Committee is working to form a community land trust for the San Gabriel Valley region with a strong racial justice focus. This committee is also looking for new members. Brings us to the North Fair Oaks Empowerment Project. The North Fair Oaks Empowerment Project works to revitalize without gentrifying the North Fair Oaks corridor north of Washington Boulevard. The revitalization includes signage, more trees, sidewalk repairs, and affordable housing. This committee has formulated 15 goals from a community survey back in 2010. The city has now approved all 15 goals. One of those goals is complete streets. Complete streets is a transportation policy and design approach that requires streets to be planned and designed for safe travel for everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, automobile drivers, and those using public transportation. This committee is now ready to work with the city to conduct a survey regarding public support for complete streets. Young people in the city's Youth Ambassador Program will assist in the survey by going door to door and holding online community meetings. Over the years, this committee has been developing into a strong organizing and advocacy force. Brings us to Accessory Dwelling Units Committee. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, are the back houses or granny flats that you often find behind many homes in Southern California. They are usually below market and provide a substantial source of needed housing. Although these types of dwelling units characterize many neighborhoods in Pasadena, with 740 legal ADUs throughout the city, many going back to the early 1900s, the city of Pasadena took action in the early 2000s to curb their construction. Between 2003 and 2017, only one legal ADU was built in Pasadena. Our ADU committee has successfully worked with the city and state governments to reverse these policies and promote ADU construction. Our committee is currently advocating for the elimination of all government fees associated with income qualified affordable ADUs and also to allow ADU construction above garages. Our committee will also soon conduct a community outreach to help people know what they need to know to build an ADU. This committee is also looking for new members. And finally, that brings us to the Congregational Liaisons. We have a network of over 20 congregations throughout Pasadena who each have designated a liaison who rallies the congregation for all of these actions and also lets us know what amazing things their congregations are up to. This month, we added Community Church at Holliston to our network, and we welcome Paul Lee as the liaison. And that concludes the committee reports.
Great job, Bert. Thank you. Thank you. Really.
So yeah,
nice overview. Yeah.
So next, Jill will bring us her executive director report and some announcements.
Yes, I want to do just a little share and show you a picture of my wonderful assistant. So Morgan has been my assistant for the last year and a half, and I have so appreciated her. And she is still going to continue with us, but she needs to cut back her hours. And she will continue in terms of any video work we need, as well as updating our website. And so, so I just want you to know we have a job opening for 15 hours a week. We hope it's someone more local here in Pasadena. And if you know someone interested, we would love to have them consider applying. It's open between now and the end of the month. The other thing I wanted to say in kind of attempting to give my executive report here is the importance of stories. And so one thing that we have is all the different people involved in our nonprofit. We ask them to think through what's their housing story. And so I'm just going to share with you briefly a little bit of mine. I was on the staff of a large church here in Pasadena. It's called Lake Avenue, and we started an after-school program there. And what we found eventually is that those kids ended up, their whole apartments were being sold out from under them. And we'd already just spent years developing relationships with them. So it was very painful to see what was happening. So as a result, God just really put it in my heart to call me into this whole arena of affordable housing. So we've been doing this housing justice work for about 25 years now, ever since that happened with those kids. And one of the things I also want to share is that I bought a home intentionally in an African-American neighborhood. And little did I know, by doing that, as I improved my property values, I began to see some of my Black neighbors go into foreclosure. And I thought, you know, I didn't buy my home here in order to make, you know, that unintentionally I became a gentrifier and pushing out my neighbors. And so that's something that I'm very committed to helping have mixed income communities and racially mixed communities. And that's really the flavor of a lot of what we're doing. But in looking at all of that and kind of a whole theological framework for cities and how God works with cities, and how enabling us to really imagine a vision for how we want our cities to be. We don't want cities that are only for those that have means. Cities are really intended for everyone. If you look at cities throughout Scripture, they're inclusive. And that's a lot of what Anthony read about from Isaiah 58. You see it throughout Scripture. And so tonight, when we look at the use of church land, it's one powerful tool in how to make cities more inclusive, to spread affordable housing and church properties throughout the entire city, the entire city, and imagine a city that is truly for everyone. I wanted to say one more thing about that, and just how, in a way, one of the original visionaries was God. He envisioned the world, he envisioned us, he envisioned cities, he envisioned all of this. So how do we begin to use that creativity we have and envision? I think of architects as truly being visionaries. You know, they see what doesn't exist and they make it happen, you know. And so how do we begin to see our cities? How do we see what doesn't exist and imagine that housing and how we can truly house our people and use the eyes of faith, begin to imagine and see, and then work toward making that happen. So so that's kind of my message. I wanted to mention about Morgan and the importance of having an assistant. Thankfully for many of you, you've contributed, and that's made it possible for us to have funding to have an assistant, which I desperately need. So please apply if you're interested or if you know someone that you think might be interested. There's just two other announcements, but those are essentially, I think it's to be announced later when we have things more set in cement. We're hoping maybe next month the focus will be accessory dwelling units. Hopefully many of you know friends that would love to build that back house, but what happens is that we don't often know the steps. We don't know what it takes to actually get there, and sometimes it can be very onerous. So we're hoping next month to kind of unpack that process and make it much more make it easy, so you can make sure you're successful in creating your back house. So hopefully I haven't missed anything in my report. Was there anything else, Bert, that you're aware of that I was going to say? Oh, about the the committee, the church land committee, the Congregational Land Committee. So we're very faith rooted in our approach, and it was really God stirring in my heart. And as I knew Phil Burns, he was on our inclusionary committee. I got to know him through that. Also, he gave us some great help around our ADU committee, our back house committee. And so I'd been talking to him about this idea of using church land. And he said, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, God had been stirring in his heart. So it's amazing all that's happened just in the last year and a half since we've been teaming up, and the folks have come together for this committee. So I just feel so honored to be the executive director of this amazing work of all the volunteers that are working so hard to bring about housing justice, and many others that are here tonight that are not part of our organization, also equally passionate. And at the end of our time tonight at 8:45, there'll be a time for those groups, including like Knox Presbyterian. They're doing some beautiful work. And we want you to take a minute and share. If you're not able to stay till 8:45, please put in chat, tell us about the work that you're doing. We'd love to learn all the work in each of your arenas that you're doing around housing justice. So that's it, I'm done, thanks.
Great, thank you, Jill. And so now we come to the main feature of the evening. Our featured speakers are Sarah Walker and Phil Burns. Sarah Walker is a planning project manager at National Community Renaissance based in Rancho Cucamonga. National Community Renaissance, or National Core, is one of the nation's largest nonprofit affordable housing developers with a 20-year track record in community revitalization. National Core promotes the future economic and social transformation of communities by building quality affordable housing combined with best practice social services to improve the self-sufficiency of its residents. Sarah will discuss the benefits and opportunities for congregations seeking to have affordable housing built on their property. And as the leader of the Arroyo Group, a 40-year-old planning and urban design firm that planned Old Pasadena, the Playhouse District, and the Civic Center, Phil Burns brings the firm's resources to the Congregational Land Committee to analyze and write zoning, secure entitlements, build consensus with community leaders and neighbors, and facilitate dialogues within churches. Phil has prepared transit-oriented development plans, zoning ordinances, and transportation plans for Metro and the cities of Pasadena, Compton, and Inglewood, among others. Having served in the Peace Corps in Guatemala, Phil is bilingual in English and Spanish and is the leader of the Children and Youth Ministry at Pasadena Presbyterian Church. So Phil is going to start us out. So Phil.
Thank you so much, Bert. Thank you, everyone, for taking your evening to come and join us for this little dialogue here. And it's especially a pleasure to see here some folks and that we've gotten to meet through this Congregational Land Committee from Ventura and from Bellflower, Los Angeles, and other communities, as well as our great city, Pasadena. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I am going to bring up a presentation today, which we'll run through very quickly. And what I'm going to do first is share a little bit about what we do as a Congregational Land Committee. Then you're going to hear from Sarah about some of the congregational land affordable housing projects that National Core has done. And then finally, we'll come back to me to talk about overlay zones as a potential zoning solution to allow more of these projects to get done. So first, very quickly, I want to introduce the work of our Congregational Land Committee, which, as Bert described earlier, is about supporting churches, about advising, consulting with churches to create a plan for affordable housing that creates real impact, that is viable, and also that works for all the parties that need to be, that, you know, are all the involved parties. It works for the congregation, it works for the denomination, it works for the city, for the neighbors, etc. And then to help churches find good development partners that will, you know, do excellent projects and provide them a fair deal for use of their land for these projects. So our committee, it really addresses all of the different disciplines, I guess, that are involved. I won't say all, because there are many disciplines, but the major disciplines that are involved in affordable housing development. And you see here the various members of our committee, including various folks who have been, you know, elected and city staff here in Pasadena. And we don't need to talk about this. Sorry, this is just some marketing fluff about the Roy Group. You know, y'all don't need to hear about that. Anyway, our committee has really unearthed a tremendous amount of interest among congregations in building affordable housing on their land. And the numbers that you see up here are numbers that have been gotten without really any kind of publicity that we have. We have 42 congregations as of today that have expressed interest, that have sought us out, that have said, yes, you know, we're really interested in building on our land, and we're interested in you helping us. We are currently working with 12 churches, as Bert mentioned, through this process, which I'll describe in more detail later on. And of course, we have one congregation that has actually made it here to the end of the process almost, which is the agreement with the developer and then getting a project actually approved and built. So why housing on congregational land? There are several major reasons. First, congregations are missionally motivated to support lower income populations, right? Second, declining congregations have opened up excess property. So even just 20 years ago, almost 70% of Americans were members of a church. Today, that figure is down to 50%. Every church is feeling, or most churches, I should say, are feeling the pressure of declining congregations and also, of course, declining tithes and offerings, which really force churches to find other ways to stay afloat. And so enabling development, enabling use of their land can help financially stabilize congregations. From a planning perspective, church land is underutilized because it's not busy most of the week. And it also presents some great synergies because many churches, including many of yours, I'm sure, are already serving folks who are needy, already doing food ministries, already serving meals, already ministering to those with emotional and mental health issues. And so doing affordable housing in these areas makes sense. And there's opportunities for land located throughout Southern California. Now, in our work, we've uncovered sort of a series of best practices that really inform the methodology that we use in working with churches. First, making sure that affordable housing can provide both missional and economic benefits to congregations. Unfortunately, we have heard many stories. I was just in a meeting just a few minutes ago before this one with a congregation that gave their land up for $1 to an affordable housing developer who said, yeah, we're going to get your people into this development. Just give us the land for free. It was a Black church. They didn't read all the fine print. In the end, none of their members were able to live in the development that was constructed there, and they'd given away their land forever for $1. So churches should be able to receive, maybe not top dollar, but some economic benefit, as well as, of course, the primary missional benefit of building affordable housing. It's important, therefore, that churches lead with a vision. It's important that they not try to do development by themselves, because it is a very complicated thing that, not even I could do. So churches should partner with professional developers, but just have it be an equal partnership. And then oftentimes it's necessary to work with the city and advocacy partners to address barriers to development, like what we're going to talk about today, which is the restrictive zoning barrier. But there's also barriers in terms of funding. There are barriers in terms of neighborhood skepticism, whether that's about the buildings that are going to be built, or whether that's about people not wanting the populations that move into affordable housing in their neighborhoods. We work, our process really allows the church to drive what they want, but have it be, sort of guided by us, who are able to kind of tell the church what's feasible and what's not feasible. So we first identify and inform congregations. We offer them resources also in terms of understanding theology of land and how to be stewards of their land for the kingdom. Conducting feasibility studies, like you see here, planning out what the campus will look like, what the zoning needs to be, what the funding is going to come from, the target populations, all of those things. Going through a phase of review and discernment, both internally and then externally with the denomination, the city, and the neighbors. Then getting to a consensus, developing a request for proposals for development partners based on that, and then helping them agree, reach a fair agreement so that they're able to develop the land. So again, as I mentioned before, as we're going through this process with many developers and particularly with many churches, and particularly those in Pasadena, we realize that really the zoning is a big barrier in so many cases. And so we started to look at an overlay zone. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah, who is going to present some of the work that National Core has done with religious land affordable housing.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. All right, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Sarah Walker. I am a senior project manager with National Community Renaissance, or National Core, and I am just really excited to be here tonight to kind of talk about something that does seem to be kind of a new emerging trend, and that is the development of affordable housing. That is mission-driven partnerships with local churches in Southern California. And I wanted to just give a little bit of background on National Core. As Jill mentioned, we've been around Bert mentioned, we've been around for 30 years, and we own and operate roughly 10,000 affordable housing units, and approximately 8,500 of those are in Southern California. And one of the things that I do think makes us unique is that we do everything from start to finish, mostly in-house. So we find sites, we do the entitlement work, we actually have an in-house general contractor to build the housing, and then we stay on and manage the properties. We don't sell them, and we make sure that they're well run and comply with the services and all of the requirements for affordable housing. And National Core believes strongly that people and place matter, and leading a healthy lifestyle starts with the basic requirement of having a stable and affordable home. And many of our developments are within neighborhoods that are in need of a little bit of revitalization. We often see that our projects can be a catalyst to provide new investment, but really focused on community services for our residents, and in some instances, local existing residents as well. So National Core has a sister nonprofit supportive services organization, the Hope Through Housing Foundation, that we bring in. They're responsible for partnering with local community groups and service organizations to tailor supportive services to the families, the seniors, and individuals that are living in apartment homes. For example, we have in some of our developments, we offer daycare, aftercare, and other youth programming that can be critical to allow parents to work full-time. We provide financial consultations and educational workshops to improve credit, reduce debt, and set families up to eventually hopefully move out of subsidized housing. And then we also do provide direct services for our seniors, things like healthcare, exercise classes, transportation, and food donations. So, you know, as Phil was mentioning, we are seeing this we've been contacted by several different churches to talk about how they can infill housing on the sites they own. And we've explored different scenarios. We've had one where a church had multiple campuses and they consolidated them into one, creating excess land. And we've also worked with churches that simply wanted to just add affordable housing to a site where the church was going to continue to operate. And while we tend to do projects that are roughly 50 units and up, it sounds like Jill does have partners that can work with you if you need a smaller number of units. So definitely reach out to her to talk about that. So the first development that I wanted to share tonight is Santa Angelina Senior Apartments. This is located in the city of Placentia, and we're proposing in this one to develop a senior affordable housing community with 65 units. And the density for this project is actually very low. It's only 16.7 dwelling units per acre, and the buildings are only 2 stories. So it's tucked within a single family neighborhood. And you can see the church is going to remain in the center of the site. And we're constructing 2 buildings, one on kind of either side to create an interconnected campus. And to build the housing units here, we are actually going to have to demolish their existing parish hall, and we will be rebuilding a new parish hall for the church as part of the project. So that's something that is an added benefit for the congregation. And I wanted to share, this is a view of building 1. It's at the northern end of the property, and you can kind of see how the residential units are going to interface. This, the building that's on the right side of the screen is the church, and you can see how the units will interface nicely. And this shows building 2 at the opposite end, at the southern end of the property, facing the single family homes. And again, we tried to be very careful about the neighborhood context and trying to design something that was very complementary. So I just wanted to share that it took roughly 3 years to get this project entitled or approved by the city. We had to go through multiple design iterations in response to the various groups that Phil was mentioning, the neighbors, the church vestry, city staff, and the elected officials. And it was challenging to find a design that everybody agreed upon. And ultimately there were compromises that pretty much every group had to make some sort of small compromise within the design. And that's somewhat interconnected to the entitlements that we had to go through, which this will all circle back to the overlay zone, but we had to complete a general plan amendment and a zone change from low density, like single family, up to higher density. And we also had to do a development plan review, which required multiple meetings with city staff and a initial study. We had to do technical studies for CEQA and an initial study mitigated neg deck. So we had to go through and get this approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council. And so we held our pre-application meeting back in April of 2018, and approval did not happen until December of 2020. And so it did take roughly 2.5 years to get this project approved. And in developer time, that is quite long. And one of the benefits to working with the church is that we did not have a carrying cost, which for a developer can be a significant issue. So yeah, it's helpful for us. So the second development I wanted to share is Orchard View Gardens in the city of Buena Park. This one, we actually were approached by the Episcopal Church in the city of Placentia. And once we got started on that project, we were able to partner with St. Joseph's Episcopal Church. They liked what we were doing there and brought us in to explore this opportunity as well. With this project, the church is located at the southern end of the site. You can see it there, it's kind of grayed out a little bit, but the northern portion of the site is currently vacant. And so this project is a little different from the previous one I showed because we're actually going to subdivide the lot into 2 parcels. And so the church will remain on the southern parcel, and National Corps is going to develop the northern portion with 66 residential apartment homes for seniors. And this one has 1 large building and several small 1-story buildings to be context sensitive to the single family neighbors. And the density is much higher. It's 37.5 dwelling units per acre. So this kind of shows how these buildings will look in the context of the existing church, which for this project, we are not planning to do any improvements other than landscaping on the church property. But it shows that building 1. And then this shows as if you were standing at the church looking north. It shows you the larger 3-story building as well as the single story to see this at the northeastern corner. So with Buena Park, similar to Placentia, we scheduled a pre-application meeting with the city back in March of 2018, and approval didn't happen until November of 2020. And similar to Placentia, here we needed a general plan amendment and a zone change from single family up to multifamily. We also needed to do a tentative parcel map in order to split the parcel in half. And the city had us do a development agreement application, which did give us some flexibility in the development standards and actually did reduce our impact fees. So probably worth it in the end. And we also had to do a number of CEQA studies. So ultimately, this again had to be approved by Planning Commission and City Council, which does add time to the project. Just backing up, Placentia, we have received, or we likely have funding set up for that project. Buena Park, we are still working on getting this particular project financed. Also with Buena Park, we had to think about the removal of church parking. So on the site, there were 121 spaces, and in order to build the housing, we needed to remove 46, which leaves 75, and technically by the code, we needed to provide 80. And this is where the passage of AB 1851 last year was very beneficial for this project, because it meant that the city could not require us to replace more than 50%. We could, as long as we left 50% of the parking, we would be okay, which was the case for this project. The last project I wanted to share is Legacy Square. It's in the city of Santa Ana, and it's currently owned by the United Methodist Church. It previously housed 2 churches, St. Luke's, as well as a newer parish hall that was utilized by multiple congregations. And so the United Methodist Church has a second campus in the city. It's roughly a mile north, and they had decided, due to declining congregation sizes, that they wanted to consolidate their campuses. And so this created a surplus parcel in the downtown, or near just east of the downtown. And so National Corps actually responded to an RFP that was issued by the church, and in order to redevelop the site with affordable housing. And the goal here was really to create a community anchor and further the church's legacy in the neighborhood. Even though the church itself was moving and consolidating into this other campus, they wanted to ensure that what was left behind is something that would further their legacy. And so in partnership with the church, what was designed is a 93 unit building for families. So it has 2 and 3 bedrooms. We've already actually demolished the existing structures, and this development is a little bit higher density. It's 53 dwelling units per acre. So you can see it's about 3 stories over podium parking. So it is a denser project, but it does step down. So you'll be able to see here, facing Santa Ana Boulevard, you have the future Orange County streetcar, and you can see it's a little bit more modern and dense facing this boulevard. However, when you turn the corner and go onto French Street, which is kind of on the right side of this picture, this is actually part of our building. It's a different architectural style, and it's two and 3 stories, and it's intended to break up the mass, kind of create a more neighborhood feel and be contextual with the neighborhood. And again, this shows kind of public art. We'll be working with the community and how this building will interface with the streetcar. So with this project, we were really lucky. The city was very supportive of the project and worked very closely with us to get it approved quickly. In terms of kind of challenges, the city has a transit zoning code, which in theory should provide quite a bit of flexibility, but it does for uses. But when it comes to form, they still have prescriptive forms that they're looking for. And in order to get the density that we needed, we actually had to ask for a incentive or a waiver of the building type for a higher kind of bigger form. So we, as you can see listed here, we had to ask for a number of incentives in order to get this project approved. But it was approved rather quickly, but would have been easier if it had been zoned for higher density. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up, you know, there's a lot of benefits that we see as an affordable housing developer in terms of having partnerships with churches. I mean, we definitely want to see, you know, there be a benefit for the congregations in terms of having there be, you know, a legacy within these areas that they are, you know, they've served for so long. You know, it's created an opportunity for us to further shared missions and for the development to serve as a catalyst for neighborhood revitalization. And you know, for National Core, we also get the opportunity to work with the churches to do improvements on their buildings, which is usually pretty fun. So yeah, affordable housing really is a puzzle. And we've been lucky that these projects have come together, and we're really thankful to have gotten the opportunity to work with all these different congregations. So, thank you.
And we're thankful for you, Sarah. Those are great examples. Thanks for sharing.
All right, I'm going to come back at you with another screen share, so hold on. Okay, so I think Sarah's examples there really show the, they really show, you know, how difficult it can be to get affordable housing approved in different cities and how important really the zoning is. Zoning, you know, not everybody may know, right? But zoning covers every square inch of the land that's in a city, and it regulates, you know, in a very detailed fashion what can and cannot be built on each square inch of land. So when a church wants to do something that is a little bit different from what was initially envisioned when the zoning code was developed, and I have to say, from working in so many cities, the majority of zoning codes were developed in the 1940s and 1950s. You can imagine that things are a little bit different now. There's a problem, right? And so what we have come up with is a proposal for an overlay zone, which is a kind of zoning tool. It's, shall we say, it is a way to create kind of unique and flexibility, unique characteristics for affordable housing developments on congregationally owned sites that will sort of apply and create different flexibility in no matter what the base zoning is. So sorry, that's my attempt to try to explain overlay zoning in an easy way. I can answer more questions about that in the future, but I think the easiest way to talk about it is just to go through what our proposal is. So our proposal would permit housing on any congregational property in the city of Pasadena, whether zoned residential, commercial, or public. In order to use the provisions of this overlay zone, developments need to be at least 50% affordable, and rental units need to have an average affordability of no higher than 50% of the area median income. Affordable homeownership projects can be a little bit higher. We haven't exactly decided how high, but it'll be a little bit different requirement. Our proposal also updates parking requirements and creates flexibility in accommodating church parking needs. As you heard from Sarah, in many cases, it is the parking lots that are going to be redeveloped into housing. And so the church needs flexibility about where can their members park on Sunday mornings. And then also streamline the process for approving affordable housing. So in addition to just allowing housing to be built on congregational land, there's also a need to, as you heard from Sarah, to allow some modest increases in density and height. And the primary reason for this is that most affordable housing projects are funded through the low-income housing tax credit. And it really doesn't make sense for any developer to do a low-income housing tax credit project unless the project includes, 40 units or more. And also the per unit cost to build affordable housing has to be reasonable. And that's why the density is also so important. So if you could imagine you spend $10 million on an acre of land in Pasadena, and you're going to build 6 single-family homes on it. Now you've already, the land cost of each of those units is $1.6 million. But if you spend $10 million to buy an acre of land and you can build 100 units on it, now your land cost per unit is $100,000 per unit. So that's one of the reasons why the density is so important to make affordable housing projects work. So we have this chart here, which sort of converts a base density that is allowed by the current zoning code into a new allowable density for these affordable housing projects, and also gives a modest increase in the height. And in many cases, these are concessions or incentives that developers are going to ask for anyway, as you heard from in Sarah's examples. But this allows them the certainty that they'll be able to get that. Another kind of technical issue here is that when you are going to allow housing in a commercial zone, then you need to establish kind of where on this table are the commercial zones going to fall. And so in Pasadena's case, we're saying that developments built in commercial only zones should be assumed to have a base density of 32 units per acre, which translates to an allowable density of 64 units per acre and a height of 4 stories. The proposal really seeks to be sensitive to Pasadena's built character, which obviously, as I mentioned in our firm's history at Old Pasadena, we're people that really love Pasadena's built character, and we care about that as well as new housing. And so we want to maintain certain, provisions of the code that require setbacks and step backs for developments that are adjacent to single family zones. We also want to allow the adaptive reuse of any building into housing. For example, a large Sunday school building that's not needed anymore could be changed into housing. Allowing churches to accommodate their, again, Sunday morning or weekday night parking needs flexibly. So maybe they want to lease a lot off the street for, across the street Sunday mornings like my church does, or do other things so that they can free up their own parking lot for these developments to happen. And then also eliminating parking requirements for any permanent supportive housing. That would be housing that would serve people who are currently homeless or at risk of homelessness. Eliminate parking requirements for those folks. Transitional age youth, that's youth that are aging out of the foster care system and are at risk of homelessness. And extremely low income folks. These are folks that oftentimes don't have cars anyway, and forcing these developments to build large amounts of parking just makes them infeasible to get done because of the really, really high cost of building parking which can be $50,000 per space or higher, depending on how it's accommodated. Finally, we believe that it's important that affordable housing development be allowed by right. That means without. That means that the public has the opportunity to improve the project, but the public and the council don't have the opportunity to veto a project. Affordable housing is often controversial, but everybody agrees that it is sorely, sorely needed. And forcing every church to go through a process by which the council members are in an extremely difficult position, oftentimes, sort of having to say no to affordable housing projects in order to appease certain people in the community, is the recipe that has brought us to this point and really resulted in a tremendous shortage of affordable housing. So we want affordable housing to go through design review. We want the projects to be commented on, improved by the community, but we don't want to see them killed by leadership. And then there's a few other sort of corollaries of that, which I won't go into at this point, because I think we've probably spent enough time on this presentation by now, but I hope you found it informative, and I'll hand it back to Jill and Bert for Q&A and breakouts.
Yeah, thank you, Phil and Sarah. Those are great presentations. So before we go to Q&A, we're going to prime the pump by going into breakout rooms, 4 people in each. Here are the questions that you will discuss, and I will put them in the chat also. First, just introduce yourselves. I guess that's not a question, but it's who are you? And second is your church interested in building affordable housing? So, a lot of churches are not, but your church might be. So we want to discuss that if you are. And then also just 3, what are your questions and concerns? So we'll be in breakout rooms for 8 minutes. So Anthony will now put us in the breakout rooms. Welcome back, everyone, for our Q&A, which hopefully you got a lot of questions primed in your small groups. For Q&A, you can please put your questions in the chat, and Sarah and Phil will answer them, but Anthony is going to be the one to read the questions. So Anthony, are you able to do that?
Yep, I can do that. I don't see any questions yet, though. So speak out if you have a question or write it down.
Well, can I just say one question that came up in our group was people wanted to know how to get in touch with our Congregational Land Committee. So perhaps Phil could answer that question.
Yep, sure. I'm the contact for the committee. So I will put my email address in the chat.
We also had questions about how much it costs and whether you give consultation or advisement outside of Pasadena.
So I'm going to answer in terms of the cost. I'd like Phil to answer, but we definitely are working now all over, not just even in Southern California. Phil, could you answer about the cost?
Yeah, so sorry, the cost was it was talking about overlay zones or church feasibility and visioning.
I think the advisement cost. How much would it cost if a church wanted to get some advice from you?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a grant from we have 2 grants actually, from the Reitha Foundation and from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative that are funding our work with congregations, and so we're so we're able to provide the services, without cost to the congregations. We will, we're without cost to the congregations. I'll just say that of course, the grant funding is limited, so we want to make sure that we're making judicious use of the funds and that your congregation is, really truly interested in building, and that there's a legitimate likelihood that the project's going to go through.
I wanted to say something about, we've had congregations directly contact a developer. And in reality, they turned back and said, why don't you work with this committee first? Because churches really need to get clear. They need to know what they want, and they need to know how to ask for what they want. And so if they can have a clear process where they have made a decision and know exactly what they want, why they want it, where they want it, then it really helps the developer. The developer then can move from there. It saves them a ton of time and money. And so this is a great opportunity for churches to really work with us to get prepared. We are not developers. We're not trying to be developers, but we will help point direction of a whole pool of excellent developers like the one you heard about tonight, and others that do beautiful work and that you can be proud of. And these are affordable housing developers, not market rate developers. They have all the experience needed to do the layers and layers of funding and to win those in order to make these units affordable. So, so you may have questions about some of that. I feel badly that we've cut our Q&A so short. Let's just take one or two more questions, but I want to make sure that we have time for others to be able to share. We said at 8:25 we were going to allow others to begin to open up and share some of the work that you're also doing in addition to the MHCH work. So
We
let's
just have one question that's come up, and maybe we can answer other questions during after we close our meeting. But we have the question, can churches rent to whomever they want, and can they charge anything they want when they build this affordable housing?
If no one answers that, absolutely not. They cannot rent to anyone they want, because this is, in order to make any housing affordable, it has to have subsidy. And and to have that subsidy, that comes often with city or state or federal funding. And so there's all kinds of laws that govern who can be in those units. They cannot discriminate in any way. And so they can have people in their church apply, and hopefully they'll get some of those units if they qualify. It's based on their income. But you can't just invite anyone you want to move in. So, yeah.
If it's a publicly funded affordable housing development, the rents will also be restricted, right? So that they're affordable.
Yeah. One way we're working, and trying to kind of prevent gentrification in some of the neighborhoods is by doing kind of a local marketing initiative. But generally, as they've stated, if it is publicly funded, the rents are set, they're built into the pro forma. And I mean, you can certainly rent who you want and have the rents be what you want, but you will not be able to apply for a public subsidy.
Okay, so I think Phil has put his information in there. If you want to contact him, if you're interested, if you have further questions, I think Phil would be happy to answer those. Yeah, so now we at MHCH know that we are not the only game in town. Others, such as Community Bible Church, are doing great and amazing work around affordable housing. Another one of those groups is the Housing Justice Group at Knox Presbyterian Church. Mike Veerman is here to tell us about that. And after him, if there's anyone else here who would like to tell us about the work that you are doing, we invite you to do so. But first, Mike will take a minute or two to tell us about the work of Knox Presbyterian Housing Justice Team. So Mike, are you still here?
I'm still here.
There you go. All right, Mike, great.
Hi, everyone. Really, I'm a newbie. I'm just learning. I've only been working on affordable housing and homelessness issues for 1.5 years at our church. Marilee Robinson is also from our church. So Marilee and Robinson and I were working on the immigration team. We have been housing an asylum seeker from Honduras for 1.5 years. And that team is doing a great job. I moved from the immigration team to the housing justice team because every church almost needs to work on these issues because it's so huge. So we're doing little things as we learn, but we are right on the corner of Hill and Del Mar. And if you know Pasadena, that's right where Pasadena City College is and Caltech. And of course, we're very much connected to Fuller, just relationally. So we've got a lot of campuses close to us. We have been fortunate because of COVID, the PCC campus closed, so their food pantry also closed. You probably know that students, especially in community colleges, struggling with food insecurity, of course, housing insecurity. So Knox is hosting the food pantry for PCC. We've been doing that since August. It's small because PCC, that's not the primary way to get students food, but it's the relationship building. Also, the housing department from the city asked us if we would allow Shower of Hope to provide showers for homeless folks from our parking lot. They bring trailers. So we do that. But last night I was talking to Tom Petersmeyer because those two efforts are going to phase out once COVID hopefully dies down. And I was talking to him about safe parking. I was like, safe parking for PCC students. You know, we have a very small parking lot, but it is unused during the night. And it could be, if it makes sense, it could be really used well for PCC students who need it. We are also working on developing a property very close to the church. Of course, you know that's a massive project, but we're tiptoeing little by little. I've actually tried it 3 times, and people keep moving out of our teams, or we just hit roadblocks. But we finally got a real estate lawyer on our team, attends our church, and we have actually some hope in getting this done. So we're going to talk to a developer actually tomorrow night. So slowly we're learning, slowly we're progressing. That's it for us. But it's amazing what you guys are doing, but I want to emphasize the community happens part. So that's why I'm sharing, because I don't know everything for sure, but I want to know what you guys are doing. So other churches, let us know what you guys are into. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Mike. We appreciate all that Knox is attempting. As he said, they're new at this and they're not experts, but they're really trying. They're trying a lot of different things and meeting needs. So, are there other people out there, people that are here tonight that want to share about some of the work you or your church or your group are doing in affordable housing?
From Monrovia, Carol Daly. We have a Monrovia Housing and Tenant Advocates group that I think we've been in formation for about a year, maybe 2 years. And we're working on making sure that we get affordable housing built into, with inclusionary housing built into our housing element, which will set the course for our city and what we're going to build for the next 8 years. And in case you guys don't know it, you probably all have your housing elements that are coming due, and public input is very important. So That's it for me.
You're doing great work, Carol. We so appreciate what you're doing in Monrovia. We need a Carol in every city. Yeah.
I'll just tag on to that. I'm with Tapestry Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Lake Forest, and we too are doing work, public comments on housing element updates, trying to shape that. And I agree, inclusionary housing is a policy that we've really been pushing forward in our different communities. This is a really critical time with these housing element updates.
They are. So Rona, are you, you can pronounce it Rona or Rona?
I'm Rona.
Rona. So is your city, do you think they might be interested in an overlay zone so they could add congregational land to their housing element RENA numbers?
Well, it's something that we would definitely want to put in our public comment to them. Our particular church, we're in a business park, so we can't do that. But this is a recommendation that we've started to put we're working in South Orange County. So whenever we do a public comment, we've started to put this as a recommendation to cities. And that's why I was interested if there was like a sample ordinance that cities could just adopt.
Yeah, we've got a close one, a sample ordinance. So yeah, Padre's really close to adopting theirs. And we're working with 4 or 5 other cities that are looking at theirs too.
Yeah, so I would be really interested in getting any follow-up information on that.
It's hard to say because I suppose the general characteristics are the same, but say, for example, the heights, the densities, all those things. What we recommended for Pasadena, may not fly in Lake Forest, right? Or something like that. So I think it's difficult to sort of give a blanket recommendation. There's certain parts of it that can be cut and pasted, but others that probably planning staff would not go along with.
Can she talk with somebody on your team though, to kind of get an idea of what to say in public comment?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
I can send you, we have a more detailed presentation as well. If you're interested, I can send that to you.
Yeah, definitely. I put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was a question about group homes. We have not really gotten involved in that, although there is a church in town that's been reaching out to group homes. And trying to help them be, I guess they were working on different aspects to improve them, but, and then some of their congregation members were attending to group homes.
Hi, I was going to introduce myself and Charles Ayediba. He's of the Urban Quality Living group. It was started, he founded it last year during the pandemic. And Urban Quality Living is an affordable housing nonprofit that's based in West Los Angeles. And the mission is to help bring the homeless population back into our communities by providing housing, healthcare, education, employment, as well as wellness services. And we are looking into like several sites for development of affordable housing. So we really would appreciate getting to know people and getting context from here. For example, Charles have initiated contact with the Santa Monica Airport Site Repurpose Plan for 2028. He has a contact there who are helping him to develop concepts and plans and proposals for land to build like housing for about like 1,000 homeless individuals. as part of that law.
That's
We're
impressive.
starting
Jennifer.
from scratch.
Wow.
We're starting from scratch.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That's awesome. Thank you.
This is Charles. This is Jill.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question for Phil. When Phil was talking about the overlay zone proposal, and Phil was trying to explain it in the idea that the zoning were instituted centuries ago and looking to allow for housing to be built in a different zone. I just want Phil to touch on that briefly. If you, say, for example, had a commercial zoning and you wanted to do residential, what sort of work would that entail, and what sort of challenges does that poses?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Of course, this will depend greatly on the city. In general, if your church is located in a commercial zone and you want to build residential or mixed use, could be mixed use with the church plus residential, or the church plus retail plus residential, then you would have to do a general plan amendment and a zone change. So it would be the same process that Sarah described for her projects in the first two projects in Orange County. A notable exception to this is, since you were from West LA, is the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles does allow residential uses on parcels that are zoned C2. So that's a major kind of exception.
That's commercial.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we were talking to Sarah over the last week in preparation for tonight, and she was telling us that one of those sites, it took over 2 years to get approval and over $500,000 to be able to get the right zoning. And so that's why these overlay zones are so valuable if we really want to get our housing work done in our cities. So we shouldn't be using our money for that. We should really be able to get this work done. But typically, in order to get an overlay zone passed, you need to have advocates. You need to have people on the ground willing to support it. And so we met with the city of Fullerton a few weeks ago, and they're like ready to go. They said, we want an overlay zone yesterday. They've got churches that want to build, and they know that they're going to have to do the rezone to make it possible for them. And but they can't do it without advocates. They said, so where are the people in the churches that will come to the city hall? Where are the people that will show up and make public comment so that they can have the backing of the congregations to make sure it's, that this will get passed? And so, so that's where we've been doing Housing Justice One Day Institutes. And those institutes equip the church to know how to do advocacy. What does it mean to advocate? We look at all the Old Testament prophets as advocates. Esther, Moses, they were all advocates. They all spoke to kings. And how do you do that? How do you do that in a way to get what you need and to do it with respect and love? And so that's really what our organization is about, equipping congregations to know how to do that kind of advocacy work. Even Jesus was an advocate. He died for our sins, but he also was challenging the system. He talked about the kingdom of God, and that was a different system, a system of love and justice and mercy. And so how do we bring about that kingdom in a way? He confronted the authorities 27 times just in the book of Luke alone. And so we try not to be confrontive. We just want to share the stories of those in need and begin to see hearts shaped around the things that matter to God. And so that there will be a desire on the part of our city leaders to begin to have a city for everyone, you know, not just for those few that can afford it. So, yeah.
I would echo that. I'm on the board of many mansions and an affordable nonprofit developer. And we are working with one church right now and working with 2 cities on the religious overlay zones. Because as you said, it can take forever otherwise with general plan amendments, zone changes, et cetera. So we're working on those. And in fact, our executive vice president has been coordinating with Phil, you know, supporting each other on different cities. Because once I think 1 or 2 cities decides to go with that, I think it'll be easier to get it approved in other cities. And the other thing that we're looking at now that someone mentioned earlier, and I think there was a slide of, are those tiny homes, those 64 square foot or others temporary shelter for homeless that can be put on city-owned property, park property, or churches. And in fact, they could even be temporary at a church while they're going through this approval to actually develop their land. So they can actually get a head start possibly on helping the homeless that way while their development is being processed.
It's a great idea, Chris. I love what you're saying. If you need any support with those cities you're working with, let us know.
A question for Chris. Are you aware of the Seventh-day Adventist project that Thousand Oaks approved? At least the land I have heard is owned by the Seventh-day Adventist, and it may be 52 units, sticks in my mind. Recently approved by some city council or planning board. Does that ring a bell?
Specifically not with me. I'm sure it does with our housing staff. I'm more familiar with some of the ones that were getting approval in Camarillo for a Tay development and a farm worker housing one. But I know where the Seventh-day Adventist property is, but I'm not aware of the specifics on it.
Okay, it's fairly recent, and I just heard last week. I haven't been
Okay,
able to.
I'll look into it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Then I had a question back toward Mike Vierman, if he's still on the call. Please again say the name of your congregation, because you said, as I understand, it's a Presbyterian church.
Sure, Virgil. It's Knox Presbyterian. So Knox.
Sure. Okay.
John Knox.
Yeah. And in which city?
Pasadena.
Oh, it is Pasadena. Okay. Because even though I'm a retired Baptist pastor, we're a member of Shepherd of Sierra Presbyterian in Loomis. And I'm trying to find other examples within the Presbyterian family of exciting things that are happening. And so selfishly, I want to be able to stay in touch.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. I'll put my email in the chat.
Fantastic. I'll put my hand also.
Knox is clearly a great example.
Wow.
Yeah.
Among our 12 churches, we have 2 Presbyterian as well.
Yeah.
Just a quick question to Jill. You were mentioning that churches or whoever cannot charge any old rent, and it has to be in the average median income for the area in which the property is located. So for this to be truly affordable homes, what is the average rent that these projects have been set at?
Not sure if I understand the question. Are you talking about the cost of being able to do this?
No, I'm talking about the rent, because we were talking about churches cannot charge any old rent because it involves granting. It involves all of the investments that goes into it, and it has to be in the average median income of the. So in your projects that you've done, what is the average rent that this churches have been able to say request for?
Yeah, I think I'm understanding your questions. Yeah, so every church is going to be totally different in what they want on their property. So there's not really an average. So I'll give you an example of a church that did this in downtown LA. It's a UU church, Universalist. And so they partnered with a developer called Mercy Housing. And they did 97 units on their church property, and they ended up building some parking for them underneath. So the church needed parking, but they got both. They got the housing on top of the parking and underground parking, and then 97 units. So by partnering with Mercy Housing, their goal is to work with special needs housing for the extremely low income. And so that would be rents for very, very low. That's like 30% or less of the area median income. And so in that case, you're targeting people that are definitely under 25,000 a year or less. And so if a church decides to partner with an organization like here in Pasadena, Heritage Housing Partners, then they do home ownership. And so in that case, your mortgages are going to be affordable for someone maybe at the moderate income level, so their income level might be anywhere between 60 to 75,000 a year or more, or maybe even upward to 100,000 if it's the higher end of the moderate income housing. So every church that we work with has an opportunity to decide what kind of housing they want, anywhere from special needs for extremely low income all the way to home ownership. It could be senior housing, it could be all different types of housing, and so so we help churches see all that range and all the choices they might have. It might be family housing, it might be youth, transitional age youth, and so all of these come with different pots of money. They all come with requirements of different rent income levels. And so whatever your church decides that you feel called to, and you then whatever the need is in the community, you kind of put all this together, mix it up, and then come up with a plan that works for everybody, as Bill was saying. And so as far as being able to rent to people in your congregation, I mentioned about that Universalist church in downtown LA. So they realized that the developer wasn't doing quite enough outreach. They felt they needed to do another layer of outreach. So without telling the developer, they took the application for all the people wanting to, being able to rent, and they translated it into about 5 different languages. And they had an outreach, and they asked everyone to come, and they actually helped them fill out the application. And so it was very creative. 5 years later, they told the developer what they had done. And a lot of the people that they helped fill out those applications with those different languages were able to get in those developments because they qualified. So there's all different, things churches can do to encourage perhaps some of their members that might qualify, or some people they know that they think would be good, but there's no guarantee, that they're going to get one of those units, but they certainly can apply. And church needs to go into this knowing that they're doing it for the community, not for the church. And unless they can do it with all their own money, they build it with all their own money, and then they can have it. You still have to follow fair housing laws, but you don't have to look at so much of the income qualification, narrow bands that people would have to qualify for, you know. It's a long answer. I hope it answers.
No, it's fine. Thank you so much. Yes, you did. That was very comprehensive. So thank you. The only other thing that I pick up from you when you were talking was I wanted to know how many layers of funding goes into a project. Phil mentioned the low income tax credit. What other layers of funding will have to go into that project to be able to come out at the end to allow for, say, 30% less of the average mid-income, because the layers of funding is what is the catalyst for the end cost to the homeless person or to the homeless community.
Charles, the good news is the church doesn't have to do any of that. You partner with a developer that gets all that income. They have the expertise to get all those layers. And so I think it's important that Sarah, she share what kind of layers of income that she's had to come up with for her developments with National Core. And there might be other developers still here that could share some of the many layers they've come up with. So.
Yeah, I mean, they often are multi-layered, at least 3 or 4. But I think one of the things that I would say is most important is a lot of these applications require leveraged funding, and that is typically local funds. So in order to be more competitive for those state funding sources like tax credits, you need to have some sort of kind of first layer of local funding. So this is where, you know, that typically would come from a city. We are seeing more housing finance trusts popping up that are more of a regional source, but having that local funding is pretty key in order to having a competitive state funding application. So.
Yeah, kind of like priming the pump.
Yep.
Years ago, I saw our mayor, Bogard, when he was mayor, and he kept showing up at these meetings in Northwest Pasadena for 69 units of affordable housing, senior housing. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He says, "Oh, they're thinking about taking some money so that they can win the tax credits, subsidy money." And that's finally what got the tax credit deal, by having the city put in some of their funding. But what the city gets back is huge in return. So when you have affordable housing dollars from outside the city coming into a city investment, it's a gigantic opportunity for that city. And in our city, it's not only an opportunity for a huge infusement of dollars coming into a city through affordable housing, it's also creation of local jobs and local contracts and local materials all being used. So it generates the dollars within a community to keep those dollars working. 20% of all contracts, 20% of all hires, 20% of all materials have to be local for any affordable housing project in our city. So it ends up really as an economic development project as well as affordable housing. So. You guys have some amazing questions.
One other idea that's not directly related to housing in the sense that we're generally talking about it is the home sharing idea. And I know in previous discussions that model has been shared, but I do want to bring it up again tonight because in Placer County, we estimate there's 77,000 empty bedrooms. And how many of those bedrooms are in a house with one other person? Maybe 2, and could be used, or even a second unit. So just that whole idea, 15 communities in California are running home share programs at the moment that I'm aware of. So it's not a new idea. We're just trying to bring it to Placer County.
It's a great idea, Virgil. Thanks for bringing that up. I think our city does partner with a home share organization. We figured out that our city's what's called an overhoused community. we have more bedrooms than we need. And years ago, when I was running STARS, the after school program, years ago, I helped get started at Lake Avenue Church. I brought a bunch of kids from that program up to a pretty wealthy part of our city. And the kids looked at those big mansion homes and they said, oh my goodness, there must be so many people that live in those big homes. And I just laughed and I said, you know, sadly, there probably is just one couple. And they go, oh, they must be so lonely, you know? And so it was really interesting to hear the perspective of the children looking at those huge homes, you know? But it's true, you know, there are probably a lot of lonely seniors and they would really benefit by renting a room to a student. And it could be a win-win for both of them, you know, but there's a lot of trust, finding the right person, building all that takes time. I figured that I had 175 roommates before I married my husband, Anthony, 10 years ago. So I think I could write a book on how to find the right roommate. I had awesome roommates and I was really careful about who I selected, but not everyone knows how to make those good selections, you know. But we clearly need to think about how to utilize what we already have. Well, Bert, are there other questions? Did you want to kind of, I know typically our meetings end about 8:30, but it's already 9. So
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the end of the official meeting. And then after this, we just hang out with whoever wants to hang out so we can get to know each other. So that's kind of where we are. We intended to do that a little earlier, but I didn't want to, you know, short circuit this discussion because this is what people came for. So I guess we can just hang out and people can ask more questions, or now it's kind of open for anything.